Hello everyone and welcome back to a video I didn't think I was going to do. It's not the type of video I'd normally do, sort of like a sort of ramble video. But yeah, recently Laravel 12 got released, which is something that I was quite excited about. I mean, I've been using Laravel for a decent chunk of time now. I think I started on like Laravel 5 or something like that. So, I mean, I've been using it since the beginning of my career, and that was 9 years ago. So, fairly familiar with it. Really like it. I think it's really good, and it definitely did a lot for PHP. It gets a lot of hate, PHP, but Laravel has definitely played its part in kind of modernizing it, I suppose, which has been great. But recently, with the release of Laravel 12, I was planning on doing a video where I basically just build a project. That was kind of going to be the whole premise, was literally just sitting down at my desk, clicking record, and just building something. And I thought it was going to be a good way of like introducing people to Laravel. I'm fairly experienced with it, so building something with it for me is fairly straightforward. But it was, I thought it'd be cool to maybe see if there's anything's changed, new features, that kind of stuff. And it would be a good like introduction for people that maybe haven't used Laravel before. Seeing something actually being built is very helpful. And normally what I would do with a Laravel project is I would get Sail up and running, because that's what I use most of the time. So Laravel with Docker, because it's the most convenient thing. And then I would install Breeze. I would select the option that I want. So like for me, it would either be API only or Blade, right? And that would be it. I'd be up and running. I'd have authentication going immediately, which is something that, I don't really want to implement it all the time. It's nice to just kind of get it up and running, and that kind of gives you a good foundation to then build upon that. And I think it works well for videos, because I don't really want to go through the kind of building up the foundation every single time. So starting off with Blade was always, Breeze was always a really good starting point. But I saw a video this morning, actually, because I was actually going to do the video, record it earlier this morning, and it was talking about the new Laravel starter kit. So as soon as I saw that title, it's on the Laracast's channel, by the way, if you want to check it out. As soon as I saw the title, I was like, oh, that's quite exciting, because it's new starter kits, maybe there's more options and stuff. But I went on to the docs basically immediately and went onto this page, which is the starter kits page, and immediately saw available starter kits, React, Vue, and Livewire. And I was kind of wondering, like, have they just not included, maybe they haven't written these sort of subheadings for Blade and API only. They must still be included, because they're very useful things to have. It turns out that's not the case. It turns out the only starter kits are React, Vue, and Livewire. So React and Vue both use Inertia and Shad CDM, which is not something I'm familiar with, TypeScript, and Tailwind. Now, Tailwind is good. I like Tailwind. Everything else I don't like, and it's a personal thing. But I stopped using React, and to give you some context, this isn't like some back-end developer that doesn't like front-end stuff. I've done full stack for basically my entire career, and I the job I work at now is my first job where I'm like exclusively a back-end developer. But for my entire career, I've done a lot of front-end stuff. I've done a lot of Vue.js. I think I've done about 5 years of Vue.js, like in total, and about 5 years of React as well. I got quite deep into that. I've done TypeScript. I've used everything. I've implemented designs from UX designers. I've done all that stuff. I'm pretty front-end heavy in my last job, which I was at for like 3 years. So this isn't like, back-end developer hates React and Vue because it's, it doesn't like front-end stuff. This is somebody that's done a lot with that stuff. And about a year and a half ago, I decided to stop using React and kind of every other front-end framework, because I just felt like the complexity of it didn't really make sense. Like it didn't. There was certain when I started using React, it was kind of nice because it felt simple, but it really isn't that simple when you compare it to just using HTML and vanilla JS, as people call it. Especially with Next.js and all the stuff that React and Next.js are doing with like the server components and stuff. It's like, why am I using React at that point, right? Because the whole idea with server components, and this could be its own video in itself, is that you basically build everything statically and just kind of return the HTML. I don't know if they actually return HTML or they return something else, but the idea is that you would build, the static pages, and then anything that was that needed client-side functionality, you would put in like the smallest component possible, and you would return the JavaScript just for that component. So effectively what you were doing is returning HTML, right, that's kind of rendered on the server, and then a tiny bit of JavaScript for whatever client-side interactivity you need. And when I saw that, when I first looked into server components, I saw that and I thought, that sounds very familiar, because that's what we've been doing for ages. So it's like all this stuff about, it started off with like everything on the client side, and you would load in all the JavaScript, and then, the client side would kind of take over. Then we had server-side rendering, and now we've got server components. And to me, server components just kind of sound like how we always did web development. So I stopped using React because I was like, oh, well, that's a bit, like, what's the point? I might as well just use PHP and then just return HTML from the server, or use Go or something like that. So, yeah, I stopped using React, and I stopped using Vue as well because of kind of the same reasons. It was like, I've used a lot of Vue, and, it is nice. But again, I can write vanilla JS comfortably and do all the functionality I need with that without any issues. So including Vue just kind of seems like a waste of time for me. Sort of more of a waste of resources. Not really a waste of time, more of a waste of resources, like pulling in all the JavaScript and stuff. And I don't really need, at least so far anyway, in the year and a half that I've been doing stuff in just vanilla JS, I've never really needed external libraries. Like JavaScript itself can do a lot for you on the client side, and like the way that I write JavaScript now is just doing, I don't want to say the bare minimum, that makes it sound bad, but like I'll do the tiniest bit of JavaScript I can to achieve the client side functionality I need. Like I don't rely on it for everything. I just rely on it for kind of DOM manipulation and sending AJAX requests and stuff like that, which you can do very easily now with Fetch. So, and that's built in. So that's kind of my way of doing things now, is just using built-in stuff, right? I use HTML and I use JavaScript, right? And all the built-in functionality that comes with the browser, effectively. So, yeah, Vue and React, sort of not really something I want to get into, like I don't get into using. Inertia, again, I mean, that obviously supports the front-end stuff, Vue and React, so I don't really need that. So these two are kind of out of the question. The only one that would really be of any interest to me is Livewire. And I've used Livewire before. I use Filament a lot. The company I work for at the moment uses Filament for their admin dashboards. And like, it's good. Don't get me wrong, I think Livewire is quite an interesting thing. But again, I'm just not really that interested in it. Like, I'm very happy just to return HTML and do everything in HTML, and any kind of client-side interactivity I need. I just use JavaScript, and I can do AJAX requests from JavaScript very easily. I can manipulate the DOM and all this stuff. I don't really need something like Livewire. I think Livewire is kind of similar to HTMX in a sense, in the sense that you can kind of swap out content from the back end. Or like the returned HTML from an AJAX request, you can then swap out that content in the DOM, which is cool, and I like HTMX. Yeah, I like being able to do that, and I've used HTMX a little bit, but I never really found it that useful. And I'm not talking about HTMX here, really, just kind of the entire concept of that, I suppose. I think there are use cases for it, and I think in the future I will use it, and maybe in the future I should sort of try out Livewire, like give it a proper go. Rather than just, because I've used Filament and that uses Livewire, and it's been okay. There's sort of things you have to get used to, and it can be a bit of a pain sometimes. I would rather just have, you know, an endpoint and HTML and all that, you know, like the basics of Laravel. Adding all this complexity to it is just, for me, I don't know, it feels kind of pointless. I guess a lot of people like it, and I think I'm in the minority, given the fact that Blade is no longer on here. Laravel still supports Blade, by the way. Like, it's not gone. It's just not supported in the starter kits anymore. It was through Breeze, but not anymore. So I sort of reached this dilemma where it's like, well, what do I do when I start a new Laravel project? Because I obviously need authentication most of the time. And normally I would just, like I say, I just use Breeze, select Blade or API only, and then I'm away. I don't really know what to do here, to be honest with you. I'm sort of a bit stuck because there are things that exist, and obviously I've got the authentication because I was kind of looking through things to see, like, oh, maybe you don't need the API only option because maybe they've actually just added all the, you know, the authentication starter stuff that you would normally get from that. They've just added it into Laravel by default. That's not the case. You do need to add all of your like endpoints and stuff, so like a register route and login and stuff like that. And Laravel does give you a lot of stuff. Like you can obviously see here is like an authentication route, so to log in, and you can do auth attempt and pass in the credentials, the email and the password, and generate the session, and then obviously redirect to intended. And I think you provide this like as the default. So it'll either redirect you back to the page that you were on, or if there isn't a page, it will just take you to dashboard. So that's easy enough. You know, it's not the end of the world, but you do have to write all this stuff as far as I'm aware. And obviously, you know, the register route and stuff, you have to, and the email reset, the password reset and the email for that. So all that stuff you have to do yourself. There is Laravel Fortify, which I've looked at before and I've never really bothered using it. I much preferred to use a starter kit because then you don't have to then bring in, you know, this entire package and kind of figure out how it all works. It just gives you the kind of base Laravel stuff, but it gives you that out of the box, which is quite nice. Fortify does kind of a similar thing, except you have to install the package and then do, you know, figure out how, you know, the things that you have to use from Fortify to get all that working, which means obviously going through this. And I don't know how tricky this is. Like, I don't know a huge amount about Fortify, but I think from what I can see, I think Fortify or maybe Passport. I think Passport might be built on top of it though, so because it's saying Passport or Sanctum, and I have Sanctum up here, and I know I've used Sanctum a few times before, and I know that if you want to use Sanctum, you have to use Sanctum on top of your pre-existing authentication stuff. Like Sanctum just manages tokens, and I'm assuming that that's kind of what Passport does. Like, it doesn't implement the authentication for you. It just allows you to kind of generate tokens and handle that, and clients and stuff. So yeah, from what I can see, the only way to go is Fortify. There's also Socialite, which I think is for using third-party OAuth 2. So instead of Passport, where you become the OAuth 2 provider, Socialite is for like using, I mean, it says it here, Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff like that, and GitHub. So that's one thing. That's something I don't know if you need to build anything on top of that, or if that builds on top of other things, or if you can just install Socialite and have authentication up and running. Yeah, it seems like Fortify is the only option that I can see, at least that's kind of provided for you. Yeah, the only reason why this is really a big issue, and obviously you can build your own authentication stuff fairly easy with Laravel. Like, it makes it quite simple. I'm not complaining about that. But it just means you have to build the front end stuff, and then you also have to do the back end stuff for every project. If you don't want to use Fortify, I guess, and you don't want to use the, and I guess maybe what you could do is get a starter kit using something like, maybe this would be a bit of a pain, but you could probably use React, like the starter kit for React, and then remove all of the React stuff, I guess. But then again, that doesn't really give you the front end stuff because it's all React stuff. And if you want Blade like I do, then obviously that's not great. So you'd still have to do all that yourself. Apparently Laravel Breeze does still work. I saw in the comments of the Laracast video that I mentioned earlier, Breeze does still work. However, it's not supported. So like it's supported for Laravel 11. I guess it still works for Laravel 12. If there's not a huge amount of changes, then it probably still works. But it's not supported. It's not something that they're continuing to upgrade. It's not, you can effectively think of it as deprecated now. Like it's not something that they're supporting. So yeah, I don't really know what to do, because I wanted to do the video that I mentioned at the beginning about building an application, and I kind of think normally it would be fine because I'd be able to jump onto the docs, run through the sail kind of setup stuff in, I think it's installation. So this is normally what I'd go through. So I'd literally run this here and then do the sail up stuff and then migrate, and that'd be kind of it. Well, I'd migrate and then I'd install Breeze, choose my options and then migrate again, or potentially migrate after doing that. I can't really do that now, which is why I'm making this video instead, because I kind of wanted to hear other people's thoughts on it, if anybody does have any, on what you would recommend doing. Because, yeah, that video would have been fairly simple for me to make, because I could have got things set up very quickly and then just started building more of like the actual application logic. But now, I think if I started recording that video, I'd legitimately be kind of confused at what to do. I guess I've got so used to using Breeze. I actually don't know what I would do, because then I'd have to, as I mentioned, I'd have to set up all the authentication stuff and create all of the front end stuff myself, which is obviously going to take up a bit of time. So I'm going to take up God knows how much of the tutorial, or not tutorial, but project building video, creating authentication stuff, which is a bit of a pain, and not really something. And if I was going to do that, I'd do that in a separate video, and then, because what I'd want to do is really show how to build an application. I don't really want to show how to just do authentication. So yeah, I'm a bit kind of confused at the moment. I don't really know what to do. My beloved Breeze stuff's gone. So yeah, now I'm a bit kind of, yeah, a bit confused by it, a bit disappointed in the decision. I've always viewed Laravel as kind of, well, not always, but recently, since I've stopped using React, and kind of all this front end madness that's going on, people trying to like overcomplicate everything. I turned to using Laravel again, because I was originally, in my spare time, I would use Node.js with TypeScript and then React on the front end, specifically using Next.js. And when I stopped doing all that, I was like, I kind of embraced the simplicity of PHP and just returning HTML. And I was like, this is so much nicer than what I've been doing all these years. And I saw Laravel as kind of like, I don't know how you'd even describe it, like this kind of the last bastion of returning HTML, which it isn't really, because you can use Go and you can use Temple and stuff, which is quite nice. And if you haven't seen that, it's definitely worth looking into. And I think, I'd love to build some projects with that at some point. But PHP is my bread and butter. Like, that's what I know. I've been doing it for 9 years now. And yeah, the PHP kind of back-end returning HTML is so simple. And Laravel was kind of almost a proponent of that. Like, I saw it as because of the Breeze stuff with Blade. And like I said, Laravel still has Blade, so it's still something you can do with Laravel. But Breeze kind of made it a thing where it was like Blade was an option. So I kind of saw it as like I don't know if I say a supporter of it, but it provided you that platform to keep things simple. And now it's kind of gotten rid of that and replaced it with, React, which is hell-bent on overcomplicating what is really the easiest thing in programming you can do. Like, front-end stuff is about as easy as it gets. And I'm not saying there's not hard things. There are front-end things that can be tricky, but when you're overcomplicating everything, doing all that state management on the front end and stuff, it's more complicated than it needs to be, right? Vue kind of does the same thing. I mean, Vue kind of gets away with it. I think it's kind of maybe because it's not as popular, it doesn't really get lumped in with React, but yeah, I mean, that's a separate video. And then obviously Livewire is it's basically you do stuff on the back end that kind of links to the front end, but it adds complication. And I don't look at Livewire and think, oh, I need that. You know what I mean? I look at HTML and stuff, and it's like, that'll do for me. Keep it simple. Bit of JavaScript, Ajax requests if I need to do some kind of... And even then, like, I'm still happy to do like a normal form submit. I don't really need Ajax all the time, but there are things where it's nice to use it. Keep things on the same page, just, change out code based on the response of the Ajax request. And that's fine. And you can do that in JavaScript very easily. You can use templates. There's web components, which I haven't used yet because I think the way that they handle CSS is really weird. Like, it's all... I get it, it's all scoped, but I mean, that again, that's a topic for another video. But they do scoped CSS, which means if you're using Tailwind like I do, I don't think it works properly. Like, you have to install a plugin that will put the Tailwind code that you need, the Tailwind CSS that you need, into the web component. Like, at build time, it will add it in. There's a package for that. But for me, the whole point of using vanilla.js is not having to install stuff. So yeah, having to create a package that then brings in, or not create a package, install a package that then brings in Tailwind, like CSS classes, and then you have to run a command to build that and stuff. Like, that's the entire reason that I do vanilla.js, is that I can do no build, because that's just nice to use. It just keeps things simple. No like Webpack or what's the other one, Parcel or whatever. Just keep things simple, a bit of JS, a bit of HTML, that's all you need. And obviously, these start kits don't really support that, which is a bit disappointing. And I don't really know what to do going forward. Like, maybe there's other start kits out there that are kind of third-party stuff that I could use. If you're familiar with any of that stuff, let me know. I'll probably look into it, and if I find something, probably make a video on it. But yeah, bit of a weird one today. Just wanted to kind of vent a little bit and get my thoughts out there. But yeah, this isn't anyway like some kind of hate thing against Laravel. I still like Laravel. I think it's really good for back-end stuff. I just think that for front-end stuff, I may have to move somewhere else. I use Astro a lot on the front end, which is really good. If you're not familiar with Astro, hopefully it'll show up. There we go, Astro build. It does things in a really cool way. It's probably a bit too much to get in this video, but you can like take a hybrid approach, and you can do sort of statically built pages, which just build up the HTML at build time. And then when you request that page, it just returns the HTML, so it's really fast for that kind of stuff. But you can also do server stuff, so you can actually do hybrid, where you do pre-rendered, which is where you build the static page, or you can turn pre-rendered off, and then it will render that page on the server if it's a dynamic page. So that's pretty cool, and it also returns Node.js, so you don't need to use any JavaScript at all, which is cool, and you can just use exactly what you need. So you can write JavaScript and it'll just return what you need for that page. So it's really cool. It's got server, what do they call them, server islands and stuff like that, which is quite cool. So like, you could have an entire page. I think it's kind of what React was trying to do with server components. So you can do the entire page kind of statically built. So it could just be the HTML, but then you have a server island which has like dynamic content. So it'll pull in the HTML and then send a request to the server island, and then pull in the HTML for that and replace like the island with the HTML code, if that makes sense. So it's really cool. I'll probably do a video on it at some point. But yeah, this is what I use for front end stuff nowadays. If I'm doing like a separate front end and an API, I'll use it. With Laravel, I tended not to do that, which meant I would use Blade. Basically for the same reasons I would use this. But now that Blade is kind of... Blade is still... I can still use Blade, obviously. But if I'm going to have to build out the Blade templates, then I may as well move to Astro, because I might as well just build it all in Astro and create my own kind of starter kit for authentication in Astro, and then just use Laravel for the backend and build up, the authentication stuff for the API, and maybe even use Sanctum if that makes sense. But you don't need to use Sanctum. You can do. I don't. I'll have to like figure that one out and see what. But I've used Astro with I think both Sanctum and without Sanctum, and it works fine. So yeah, I might have to do that and see how that goes. Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but I am legitimately kind of confused at the moment of like what to do, because like the whole Breeze thing with like the Blaze starter kit was such a, for the past I don't know how many years, but that has been my go-to. Like when I start up a Laravel application, I install Breeze, choose Blade or API only. I never choose the other options, React and Vue and stuff like that. Just Blade, API only, and go with that. And then I kind of know where I am. I've got authentication done, and I can move on with actually building the application. And now the starter kits have literally removed the two things that I always use. So yeah, it's a bit of a pain, but I'm gonna have to figure it out, and hopefully at some point soon I can make a video on Laravel and go over how to build applications with Laravel, because everything else is the same. Everything else is just as good as it was before. It's just these starter kits that have changed. But yeah, a bit of a different one here, a bit of a different video. But hopefully you enjoyed. And if you do have any suggestions on what to do with Laravel in regards to kind of the starter kits, let me know. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you're happy with this decision, obviously if you use React, Vue, or Livewire, you're probably completely fine with the decision. But if you're like me and you like to keep things as simple as possible, then it's not great news. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.